Welcome everybody, it's July 16th, yes, 2019 and lunar eclipse. So, wow, you're going to spend it with me. Well, we've got some cosmic work to do today. So I'm going to kind of start off a little bit different today. I do have some, they asked me to stretch things a little. I'm like, oh no. So subject matter is going to be very interesting, and I wore my Pumas just in case the reaction isn't so good. I can lead you all out of here and escape quickly. Let's see. I've got some things to talk to you about near the end, but before that I've got to lay the groundwork, and it might be a little sensitive at the end. So to start off, we all know oops, my graphics. We all know Purusha by now, and Purusha is the Hindu or Sanskrit for the one consciousness. And we've worked with that enough now to really understand that one consciousness. And so I've got a few questions to ask. We've all been over enough times. The symbol for Purusha is a circle, or more accurate, a sphere. And even a sphere doesn't truly denote Purusha or consciousness, because consciousness is everywhere. So it doesn't really have a boundary. And it's equidistant. It's everywhere. So this symbol, the I, is consciousness. So in Purusha, we're center.
Everywhere?
Everywhere, yes, exactly. Everywhere. Okay, so why is it everywhere? Well, we've gone over already that consciousness has quantum characteristics to its fabric. The fabric of consciousness has quantum characteristics to it. And so those characteristics are holographic and fractal, but also superposition and singularity. Okay? So inside of Purusha, all the dualities, since Purusha is a collection of infinite dualities, all the dualities, like yin and yang, have found their place, home within each other. There's no need for materialization. They found their home. So inside of Purusha then, superposition takes place. Consciousness is everywhere, so everywhere is center. Home is everywhere. Pretty convenient. All right, so the process of Purusha, being that metaphorically it makes a decision to not to know itself. And it thinks it's such a good idea that it does what it can in order to create an area within it, because there's only consciousness, so it takes an area within it and asks that portion to go to sleep. Forget who you are. Forget where you came from. Forget why you're here. Forget where you're going. And that's an unconscious form of consciousness. All right, so I used the metaphor in the past, when that happened, of a balloon. And for special effects, I'm going to blow one up. And try not to traumatize everyone by popping it when I change it. So the one, metaphorically, the one consciousness makes a decision that part of itself would go unconscious, so it has to take a portion of itself relegate to the boundaries, and it does this by a twist in consciousness, twist in the fabric of consciousness, a twist in the multiple layers and levels of consciousness. And so when it did this, it created a section that was unconscious, and so that section was void. So when Purusha, at that very moment that it makes a choice to allow part of itself to go unconscious and part of it to remain conscious, there's a twist, because you can't disconnect. There is no disconnection. It doesn't exist. There's only consciousness. But it can go unconscious. So at the moment that it makes this change, where's home? Where would home be? What connects all of unconsciousness to consciousness? Well, that's where we get into sacred geometry. Because all the dualities then, splitting like yin and yang, but there has to be a breadcrumb trail leading the unconscious back to the conscious. So there's an innumerable amount of pathways between consciousness and unconscious. So between yin and yang, there's infrastructure that's created by sound, frequency, light, heat, all kinds of things that tie the two together. And those, if you've studied sacred geometry, this is where the one creates the two, and there's infinite pathways that begin from that moment. Okay, so if that's the case, then as you see the fabric, if I pull this apart a little bit, we can see the twist between the two. So all the layers and levels of fabric connecting the infrastructure between conscious and unconscious pass through that very nexus point. And that very nexus point is that singularity inside infinitely small area known as the eye of the needle, in between the left and right ventricle and left and right atrium of the heart. And so the center in this case is right in your heart. And it sits on the pathways that lead the connections between consciousness and unconsciousness. So, literally, in the eye of the needle, in the throne of that infinitesimally small place, but remember, it's quantum, so infinitely small is paradoxically infinitely large. So, here at that very center point, that is the center of Purusha and Prakriti. And you exist right there. We're all kind of born to experience a little piece of the fractal of the one that resides right here. Right there. So, here's Purusha, here's Prakriti, and Prakriti is the void. Prakriti is the space where all separation, materialization, consciousness, time, space, distance, all that stuff exists. But it's consciousness, or let's say the lack of consciousness, that allows the separation of all the dualities to spread out across the void and manifest experientially. Prior to that, they're at home. They're at real home, rest home. So we sit right at the center of these two states. in the Purusha Prakriti metaphor. So when consciousness went unconscious, creating the void, and remember in our last evening session at Storm Wisdom last month, I used the metaphor of, got to get this graphic back on, that as soon as the void was created, it was like the consciousness going blank. So Purusha, sitting above the void, or Prakriti, at one point, it was crystalline clear and cohesive, one. But forgetting who it was, where it came from, where it's going, why it's here, something happened. And that something that happened was it fractured. Consciousness is the home of all dualities. Consciousness is the home of all paradox. What splits paradox into their competing, opposing contrasts? Unconsciousness. If you forget where home is, you got to go re-experience it. You got to go rebuild it, so to speak. So experience helps us wake back up to the consciousness within and begins the preparation. So it fractalized, and we have this beautiful crystalline sphere here, and the metaphor of it fracturing into all kinds of delineations is like taking a hammer and not only hitting it from the top, but impacting it from the inside, so it's fracturing from the inside out and the outside in. So every part of the unicity is coming apart at the seams. It's coming apart at the dissociation. Consciousness forgot. Unconsciousness is dissociative, and it's highly competitive, and it competes for dominance. So let's put it into action against ourselves and all our dualities to give us a timing mechanism and an experiential taskmaster to put us through all kinds of challenges. So when it fractured, it's almost like, now this is nice and even and disseminated in beautiful and easy to see stages. So we could say that it's almost like a crystal ball, and the delineations of all of those facets exist not only from the surface but all the way into the very center. So we take all of consciousness as the one in the eye of Purusha there. It's nothingness. And then it forgets who it is, and so inside of the void, it can dissipate. It can fractionate. It can go have an experience, a journey of unconsciousness. And so here's the fracturing. That's the best image I could come up with, rather than getting a full sphere and breaking it, but I didn't want to do that. So when that consciousness fractionated, it first moved into two different sides One is polarized positive, and the other is polarized negative. And this one, remember, it's one. So let's just put it in a different metaphor. Your front side became polarized positive, which is, I only want to do good. And your back side was, I only want to do the things that really please me and serve me. So it does all the unconscious things. So it does it becomes the most primal of consciousness, learning why you don't do certain things. But it takes a long time. So as it splits into these fractals, you can see there's delineation, there's lines in so many different directions, but it's all one. So from the one, all of a sudden, we've got all these different, remember, this is now broken down into, as we've seen in the other graphics in the previous evening session last month and the month before. If we took this sphere, the metaphor of the fractalization, and we look at the dissemination from solids at the very center, because that's the most separated. Then the next one out, liquids, gaseous, astral, plasma. They're supposed to be etheric right after plasma. I don't know what happened there. But etheric, then voidness and consciousness. So lining up these levels, and you can see one is larger than the other. So we're encased within the same consciousness that went unconscious, but it's embracing us in all the different orchestrations to enable us to completely go unconscious, to completely experience separation. And when it does that, when it sets up these conditions, then each little sherd, remember, the fabric of consciousness, holographic and fractal, has superposition and it has a singularity. So entanglement becomes a really important teacher. The singularity at the center of the heart, being unconscious and unaware, is building experiences to begin to evolve the consciousness. That's the MO of being, the modus operandi of being in the void, being in Prakriti. Its MO is to provide conditions, circumstances, and challenges to educate, evolve, awaken, and assist in transforming the consciousness. Because we're never supposed to remain in separation. We're supposed to return with all the information that we've gathered experientially. So when it fractalized, and remember every little shard has everything within it, everything it needs. And remember those qualities, fractal, holographic, superposition, singularity, and entanglement. So, with all of those components, this experiential line, let's say it's a probability line, a line that includes your lifetime in 3D. And so, being in the 3D, we kind of, the reality, as I've shown in previous graphics or previous evening sessions, the singularity has those fiber-like filaments, and they go out. We have both contractive and expansive elements to our singularity, and they have fibers of filaments, and they go out and they create like a torus field. They create like a torus screen of our awareness and consciousness. At first we think we're the body, and as we've seen over these classes, we've been taking step by step to begin to realize the body is an avatar. You are the consciousness, you are the screen, and that all bodies are moving across the screen. And so as we've moved our awareness and attention to the observer, we also have the source, which the source is right in that center of the singularity. And so singularity is the fractal that this one once held. So this one fractalizes, begins a path of experience. And that path of experience is very much just like this graphic here. It's a torus-like field. Those screens, they're on layers and levels that extend out. However, the layer of the screen that we work with reflects back to us the shadows that are in our consciousness, and they define the cages. And so those cages, as we face our challenges, those cages begin to integrate, begin to open up. And so we get experience, we get the ability to open up and see and experience greater expanses. So we're not so hooked into the character anymore, neither are we hooked into the stories that come up. And so the stories, that's part of what we need to go through. The stories, as I've shown before, they come up and create the 7 roots of unconsciousness. And those 7 roots of unconsciousness begin with abandonment and betrayal, which creates guiltiness. So the moment that we went unconscious, of course, we've been over this enough times. Thousands of times, so I don't need to go over it again. But abandonment and betrayal, of course, when you first go unconscious, you start looking for why you're in the place you are. Why are you disconnected? And it feels in the void, cold, separated, and you don't have any memory, so you begin looking externally for those missing components, the things that you seek deep inside you to heal. And so one of the first things you come up with is, I seem to remember, why did I get stuck in this dark hellhole, so to speak? And as you go along, finding that you can't do anything to change this. This is before you have arms and legs. This is you're abiding in the void. This is the period before, let's say, the second, well, first you had the first suns, the super suns go off, explode, and live and die. And then you had the second generation, which then you now had the elements to create human bodies and all of the things that we see orchestrated. So there's a long period of time that we existed without any arms and legs, but can't change. So it feels like you're not able to feel the comprehensive whole because you forgot. You forgot that connection. You forgot where you came from, who you are, where you're going, and so on. And that feels like, at first, you've been abandoned, and then later, it feels like a betrayal as you begin to think about it, because you didn't have any choice. Who put you here? And then you start to feel guilty about it because you can't change it. Then you feel like you make a story and you begin to feel that you must have did something wrong, or you must be faulty material entirely, and so your fabric is cannot be worthy of returning back to the one. And so then you go through those 7 roots of unconsciousness and all our pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, anger, all are surface, but they lead you to those 7 roots. All right, so trying to find the answer to these 7 roots, we've gone out experientially as a fractal through creation, now inhabiting bodies, and like a torus, and a torus, this is beautiful, a torus moves uniquely, bringing all the different spectrums of the rainbow through one side. One side it's receiving and integrating. The other side it's projecting, separating. And so energy fields go halfway before they begin to make a change in energy, and then instead of masculine, this is the projective side, so this would be masculine. And as it makes it halfway around and separative, then it begins to flow into more of the feminine, so it moves into integrative. It's getting ready to return. And so one of these lines, if you can see this line here, and a torus has so many different lines. And metaphorically, we could say that this is the generation of your history in 3D linearity, and maybe you experience in one lifetime a segment, or even multiple segments. And in other lifetimes, where you're male, now you go female, sometimes it takes a while to cover an entire quadrant, but you're building all these different experiences, and it's all leading, as you come back, you're giving everything back to the core, you're giving everything back to source, you're giving all the details. You know, take out the highs, take out the low, take out the judgments, and all your polarized experiences become non-dualistic, because that's how it's received. So at the singularity, we've talked before about how the singularity's job is to take what's entangled and disentangle it. Start another journey. So as you go through this experiential band, meeting the shadow self on all these different experiential lines, pretty soon we make a round, and as we meet the singularity, then it projects out what's entangled, and it gives you the shadow of what you're about to disentangle, what you're trying to work with, so that you can freely move to that next level. As you work through a layer or band of meeting the shadow self in these different areas, let's say Spirit has you come up and experience powerlessness, right? And powerless, it's difficult for us to accept ourselves as powerless. We'll do anything to change that. Anything. And we'll try for a long time to prove that, no, I'm not powerless. I'm not powerless. And whatever it may be, maybe you need to go to school longer, maybe you need to, as an athlete, maybe you need to work harder, whatever it is, you want to prove you're not powerless. But ultimately, you got to face it in one direction or another, before you can face it in all directions. Because powerlessness, counterintuitively, we keep pushing it away and trying to prove it. So this is a action of polarized positive and polarized negative, trying to change the drama and the karma. And so, how do we change it? Yeah, it's counterintuitive. You got to embrace your powerlessness. What? I don't want to feel that. And that's the biggest thing. That's what's keeping us from empowering ourselves beyond measure. The powerlessness teaches us three things, as all of these do. There's three main things that when we finally stop, face, embrace, and accept powerlessness, all of a sudden we see, oh, I'm not really powerless. Remember, you got to accept it first. I'm powerless. I'm powerless to do anything. However, this delineates the difference between mind and consciousness. And in consciousness, you have the ability to communicate your needs, your boundaries, your respect, your equality. So, you are conscious. You have the ability to communicate. And third, you have choice of attention. These three things cannot be taken away from you. So your choice of attention, do I remain powerless and floundering, trying to prove endlessly? Eventually you get old, so you can't be the super star you're aspiring to be in whatever direction. But you can't accept it. And you can begin to experience the transformation that takes place that, oh, I've never been powerless because I've always been able to communicate. Now I can communicate with much more clarity. And I can remain distracted by choosing powerless or choosing distractions and endlessly run from what I'm feeling, the disempowerment inside, or the loss of respect. Or you can choose to empower yourself. Oh, I've been recreating the same situation over and over with all these different people that don't respect me because I don't respect myself. I don't give myself the necessary respect. I don't take myself seriously. I don't see myself as that whole, as complete, through the whole thing. I'm identifying with all the elements that are constructs, which are history, identity, and personality. History comes over time. We don't remember who we are, so we use the external experiences of lifetime after lifetime in order to patchwork quilt an identity. Well, a history first, and then that history gives us some form of identity because we relate to, this is what I am, this is what I am. No, you're not. You're that. That means you're everything. And so that's why we face all these wounds that we can't run from. Oh, we can choose to run and choose to remain distracted, but they always come back, they always repeat. So one by one, these seven mortal wounds: powerlessness, worthlessness, needlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, and the worst one, I'm nothing. Because it wakes you up when you accept it, and you're not running anymore. All of a sudden you realize, no, I'm eternal consciousness. Always have been, always will be. And I'm returning to that identification. Okay, so then that fractal is essential of source fracturing the one, which seems blasphemous. It seems like we put it on our shoulders to reconstruct the one. Crusade until we get it back together because, you know, we got to help God. Got to reform the crystal. Really? Sounds like somebody's got a tyrant on their shoulder. So when the fracturing occurred because of the unconscious, you'll notice it's working out nice and smoothly, just like the director decided. So the fractal goes out and makes all these different experiences, rubbing up against all the other fractals that it does in its life, pursuing those things that only make sense to that individual, those passions, those truths, those beliefs, even those belief systems, until they resolve themselves by experiencing something deeper. So when a band is completed, then, you know, and you faced your shadow in all these different areas, all of a sudden another band starts to open up and you go, oh wow, I can experience the one, the me. Now I'm realizing, oh shoot, the me is all my best friends. No matter what competitive state or conflictive state they present, remember, it's assistance without interference. So we can't really crusade. I mean, you can go crusade, but it's painful. But you can assist others by sharing that type of consciousness, sharing that understanding and seeing the one that you are existing in there. You can feel the familiarity in each and every person and their habits and patterns, and then when we see that it's all fractal, all the wounds, guess what? All the wounds are fractal. It's just you're taking a different path than another individual. So Spirit's got you going out and experiencing, collecting all the data and coming back with your interpretation so that the one has the whole of all the different fractals going out and experiencing just exactly what you're experiencing and coming back and bringing it, hopefully with less and less polarity and duality. Now you start seeing more compassionate appreciation and understanding. Oh, the manager, the real manager, has a huge job waking everyone up in their own timing, in their own way, under the perfect circumstances, because morality can't be mandated. It has to be experienced. You will rise to that. So this brings me to another important point. And I got to tell a little story. But the story involves some very important rudiments. And that story, the story begins on the island of Hawaii, Oahu. I was part of a women's spiritual group. Many of you have heard the story a number of times. Back in the early 90s, and one day, our spiritual group, which was on the island of Oahu, and we were kind of located in Hawaii Kai, so it's outside of Honolulu, and we decided we would go swim with the dolphins. And for most of the people there, it was the first time to go swim with the dolphins at Makua Bay on Oahu, which is on the western side. And we got up all early, all excited, but there was one lady in our group that was deathly afraid of water. And she felt like she couldn't swim, and she deathly afraid of water. And I was at that time I was certified as a rescue diver in scuba. So I told her, hey, I'm rescue diver, I'll just be next to you, and you know, I'll assist you. We'll get a boogie board, and I'll make sure that you're safe. And so that was okay with her. So we all drove out to the western side of Oahu and to Makua Bay. And as we parked at Makua Bay, there was so many dolphins there, and they were jumping, spinning, and they were just, oh, you could feel the joy. The joy was so powerful that everybody in the cars rushed to get their equipment on and get out into the water. And so, you know, as I was getting my stuff on, I remembered the girl I needed to stay close to, and I went looking for her, you know, and she's already out in the water. And I'm going, what? And so, so I get up there really quick, and I go, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I go, what about the fear? So she was having a blast, and then all of a sudden, those dolphins who had us in joy, all of a sudden they changed all the frequency, and they hit us with all these visualizations of their friends and family members being pulled up, hauled up by nets on boats, or being abused by humans and stuff. And so all of us went into this instant crying, and just, you know, it was just horrible. And after a few moments of this, you know, they showed all of the things that, you know, humans have done. After they got done with that, then they turned on the joy again, and we were back in the joy and stuff. And so we were like, what was that all about? And they shared with us that, I'm speaking as if dolphins speak regular English to or Hawaiian, hey brother. But they shared with us that before we can really commune on a very deep level with you guys, you have to feel all of our wounds, and it's a test for shareability, a test for compassion, a test for cohesion. Is that going to, you know, put you into self-judgment? Is that going to put you in projection? Becomes the question. And we needed to show you those things, so you know our wounds, we already know all of yours. And from that moment on, you know, we've had amazing experiences with those dolphins. Well, when you see this test for sharing and test for compassion, it's really, really important if we're going to extend, you know, our torus fields into larger and larger boundaries. And as we extend that field into larger and larger boundaries, of course, the very fact that we've worked through a lot of these shadows becomes quintessential. In other words, if creation is going to lift another of the torus boundary fields for you to operate within, it has to first test to see, can you work with one or more of these shadow issues coming up, ending any form of projection, and instead be willing to embrace the shadow and begin the process of disassembling the underprocessed stories and beliefs, the wounds, the pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, anger that go into surrounding any of these forms here. If that's the case, that you can take one, spirit, as we've been working with this, spirit likes to give us one topic or two topics until our muscle, our ability, our foundation, and our ability to spot, flag, embrace, and begin the disassembling of the shadow and all its projection. If we're stable with that, then it can send a whole bunch at once. And you're able to see through projections. That's shadow. I ain't leaving my center. And so you're more able then to stay centered and see clearly, because that's what it's doing. It's teaching how to remain in larger and larger fields of openness while shadow comes up to be sorted, educated, awakened, integrated. It's up to us. That's why we're the steward of our dissociated parts. Only we can guide our parts back home. No one else can. No one else can do it for us. And so part of this layers begins to work with your extended family, your group, your friends. And then the group gets bigger and becomes more of the, of the province, maybe statewide conscious, maybe national conscious, international conscious, so that you don't take any being so much as alien anymore. They're all human, and they're all you. So as we experienced before, we shared about the solid, liquid, gaseous plasma being like the fractal, the mirror within the mirror within the mirror. So if we had solid, liquid, gaseous plasma and so on, you are all the constructs. It's your consciousness. They're not alien. They're alien in certain stages of separation consciousness, but after a while, as maturity evolves and as work with the shadow, shadow is the boundary, shadow is the wall, shadow is the fractures and divisions that causes the splits. So as we work with those, then we begin seeing, it's all me. And the reason for that is huge. Because if reality is alien, we ain't ever going to integrate it. You ain't ever getting out of the fractal boundaries. If it's alien, you ain't coming out. But if it's all you have right to be anywhere. All of it integrates back into nothingness again. All right. So, when the one moved consciously into unconsciousness in the void, it did it all at once. All probability lines, all timelines, everything happened at once. We're experiencing the delineation of time and distance, space, and so on. But it all happened at once. And that's hard to get your head around. But if it all happened at once, and you can see that this one sphere coming from the one consciousness, as it separated and fractionated, it also delineated into all the different star systems. And this becomes really huge. All the star systems are you. All the echelons that we know of the let's say the Elohim, the seraphim, cherubim, angels, archangels, all these different delineations, then are you. That's why you have right to them. That's why they come when you call. They are you. But the separation creates a stigma of forgetfulness, so the appearance, the illusion of alienness stands out. And then worthiness and so on become quotients in that separation boundary. So as we take away those shadow forms, the fractures start resolving themselves. It's the me in all these different civilizations. It's the me in all these different timelines and probabilities and all these different beings. Again, let's hit that crusade clause. Assistance without interference means you don't go out into the cosmos crusading. It's the other way around. Your awareness becomes counterintuitive and starts to realize, oh, it's the me in them that I can align with, that I can feel for, that I can begin to associate with, that I can begin to assimilate back in. So your extension of your heart, your boundaries start dropping because your polarization is fractalization. It's unconsciousness. So as we see, as we experience these other beings coming to us, yeah, it's a little frightening because they're extra paradigm. They're outside of the paradigm. But they're all connected through infinite sacred geometry. Remember? They all cross through. That means you are the arbiter of all decisions in your association with all these beings on whatever level. And so, as your consciousness works through the separation, the alienness, by working through the shadows, where are you? You're unfolding your superposition, existing everywhere. It takes time to unfold the superposition. You know, at first we come in here as unconscious. We're dictating to the singularity what to project. Linearity. I need linearity. I can only handle one thing at a time until I can start handling multiple things at a time. And then finally, over time and maturity, oh, I can accept the whole back into myself. That's the only responsibility we have. As it arises, we're not fighting anymore. We're fighting our projection, clearing it up, integrating, opening the pathways, and what happens? Resolution happens. We resolve the pathways for all on whatever boundary level. And if we don't know that, then there's endless effort going into trying to change things or change you. Your healing comes from awakening. Awakening to who and what you really are. Not the hodgepodge patch of history, identity, and personality. You're beyond that. Way beyond that. And as you reclaim it, healing comes. There's a gift when you allow the vulnerability and sensitivity to return back in, creating communion and connection and reverence with all things around you. And there's such a confidence in knowing you're the fractal of the source consciousness, gaining experience until you can see it everywhere. Then you start stewarding and nurturing all life everywhere. What does it need in this moment from me? How can I assist? That's not crusading. That's assistance without interference. And so here's the last topic. And this is where I got to make sure my shoes are nice and tight and ready for me to run. All right, we went galactic. And the whole cosmos. As I've shown earlier in those graphics of the distribution of the cluster and supercluster known as the Laniakea and the Perseus Pisces, the spread. It kind of shows you, just like the balloon, twisted in a spread. The Big Bang happened like this, but there's been many Big Bangs. Anyway, and you're right at the center of it. So, seeing that, and that where the screen, then there's a little bit of a challenge. And the challenge is in 3 different separations. Let's say you haven't found yet the safety and security, the level of safety and security necessary to see all things as one. That doorway's closed then. So everything predominantly is alien and has alien intentions. Whether it's your next door neighbor or the person down the road. It doesn't have to be an alien. It could just be somebody alien to you. You know your intentions and what your integrity level is. So let's say you've been around for a long time, over and over and over. And that postulation of finding security and allowing everyone to be equal with you. So, all right, so you want a little bit of a guarantee. And the guarantee comes up something like this. And let's just say this is metaphorical for my own safety. But if you're not involved in your spirituality or your trust in where you came from the one consciousness, so you don't know where home is. So you want, and let's just say you've been in the position of experiencing the great openness that happens when you're in love. And when you're in love, I mean really in love, it's so good, but if it's dependent on something external and you can't control that externality, and eventually that externality betrays you, leaves you, or whatever, it just didn't work out. You feel a pain. And there is a subtle story that gets written. I don't ever want to open that much again. I don't want to get run over like that again. I don't want to be taken advantage of again. I'm never going to open that far again. Now, like I said, these are kind of unconscious stories that you make. Then when it happens again, then you're more adamant. The more wide open you go, the more you start creating these stories in the back of your mind. So what happens then, time goes on and things are starting to work out finally, and then all of a sudden you get posited with the proposition of opening up to love. Unconditional love. Wait a minute, I want some guarantees. I need some control here. All right. So with that understanding that there's been wounds over the time that the individual has spent in history, identity, and personality, and the insistence on guarantees, control, and so on. What are the three main fears that each civilization? This is a fractal, so every civilization is afraid of the unknown, wants to control the unknown, because in our history we have in our databanks all this inconvenient and powerfully painful stuff that has happened. And so beings, same beings, they're all consciousness, they're all from the one, want guarantees. And so, okay, this is metaphorical, remember. Let's say you've been wounded enough. You want guarantees. So, you try to control. There's three areas that you try to control, and those three areas are, and they have several within those three areas, but let's say politics. Those with the need, with the greatest amount of control, try to run the politics. The industry, the banking, the commerce. Control. I don't trust, and so I want control in this area. All right, next area is technology and artificial intelligence. In use for making my life more convenient and the ability to control the unwanted when I meet the unknown. And so here's a big area. And then one other area is also control of the access to God through religion and religious practices. And so with those three in place, or in play, and the edifices of those things at play, one tries to create empire. Empire goes into past, present, and future. Future can be delineated into all of those things. So all of those different species. Why am I bringing this up? Because there becomes a quintessential element in recognizing as you awaken, do you need an authority outside of you to connect with any of those species that are already you? No. So there's no need of a federation of any type. So there's a proposition of an externalized federation going through an authority that has people running it that are not part of awakening to the internal connections that we have, but no, they want more control of politic, industry, banking, commerce, artificial intelligence, technology, and or religion. Even in any of those three that I mentioned, where's source? It's in you. Always has been, always will be. And so, I'm bringing those three up because in our near future, it's going to be a contest. An enlistment contest. Do you want yours? The expansion of you and your connection with all things, or do you want to improve the repetitive process that keeps repeating itself and is run by people that doesn't have conscious integration as their intention? So, that's something to think about. Anyway, any questions before we go off into our meditation? Yes?
There's no past, there's no future. It's just everything existing, right?
Yeah, yes.
So all of this fractalization, the dissociation, all of that, plus the oneness, the integration, the Purusha, consciousness, it's all existing.
Yeah.
So aren't we done?
When you wake up. We have to, the individual fractal has to wake up to it. So it's been proceeding as if there's a linearity, right? But all probabilities happen. Yes, exactly, exactly, exactly. But to a consciousness that's inside the eggshell, to have it open too soon is crushing. So it has to experience the linearity until it can begin to take in more probabilities, and then as it can digest multiple probabilities, then it can start to open the shell.
What is samadhi then?
Well, there's many layers of samadhi. Okay, so I would contextualize that samadhi is waking up to the fact that you don't have a history, identity, and personality. You came from there. Yeah. And then it begins to branch out. If I'm from there, and then you got to, work integrate your consciousness facing your shadow, because those are all our roots, right? And so as we disentangle, or let's say pull our roots up back into the heart again, then it frees you up from the timelines.
Because at the same time, there is a reason why we're here as humans.
Yes. Yes. Yep. For as long as that happens. And humans are the unique prospect. Because apparently there has, if we go back into the time element, there have been several opportunities repeatedly of trying to get more and more consciousness to wake up. And so it's gone through the generation of putting it on, the responsibility of the different species. Humans are already the DNA of so many of these that it can hold the electromagnetic spectrum, so to speak, of consciousness. The human is the one that's ready and able to see the whole without having the polarized judgment on it, can integrate all of that.
And who created the human?
Don't know. I think they all conspired at different, we're going back to time, at different times injections were done experimentally You know, one of the things was the Syrians recently. The Syrians over the last year have been testing for compassion and sharing. And so to see if we were able to handle their, history of negativity. And part of their oopses is the genetic experiments, and where they kind of had a blind enthusiasm. Blind enthusiasm means you using the best of your intention, but you don't know the end result of what you're going to do, and so you do it anyway because you have the best of intention. You're blinded by the enthusiasm. Oh, I think this is going to be really good, but it turned out kind of bad. And so a lot of those secrets are now coming up to be shared over this last year, and so sharing of those secrets made it possible for us now, just like working with all of the wounds. They hit you with one at a time, then they start hitting you with multiples until they can hit you with all of it. So experientially, we're entering a phase now where the entire history of the galactic and their wounds and their oopses, which we're the ones who did it. So it's a matter of us accepting ourselves in all of those positions, in all of those different timelines of what we did. And so, we, like I showed in that one graphic, and I was talking about, let's say the front of us was polarized positive and the back of us was polarized negative. It's all you playing both sides. And so now it's time to accept that you've done everything. And you've been in every civilization. And so as the human, we're ready to enable a possible embracing and integration of the whole through all of the shadows of the galactic shadow. And that enables us then to look at the ego, just like we had the concentric circles, when the solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, we have an individual ego, we have a provincial ego, national ego, and international, solar system, galactic, intergalactic, and universal. And that's mechanized. It's needed for the unconscious to walk through without memory, guiding that part that's trying to get enough experience to wake back up. So the ego has all these delineations, and when you accept the vision of the experience of your ego on all these different levels, it's almost like in Matrix, where Neo in the third one, where all the machines hooked to him, and he's saying, yeah, the problem is Agent Smith. He's gone out of control. But Agent Smith is Neo's ego, right? And so as Neo realizes, I'm consciousness, not ego. I'm not Agent Smith. Then he's allowing the machine world to pull himself out of all of those orchestrations, not follow his ego, follow consciousness. And so that's, as we start to see that, we start to liberate then from the delineations of self.
So love and compassion, forgiveness are critical.
Critical.
Super critical.
Yes.
These should be the most important things that people are teaching. Education for children.
Unless you have the compassion, you cannot bring your shadow parts home. The compassion and understanding and the appreciation. Because the appreciation is, it woke you up. It gave you all the challenges. It taught you what not to do when you wake up. Yeah. It's huge. And that's probably some of the, premier things out of the Dalai Lama's mouth is compassion. Compassion.
Have you heard the wisdom schools out in California? They're blessed by the Dalai Lama.
Oh.
My nephew and niece went to one out there.
Oh.
And where they're taught love and compassion. The teachers have to have special training. This is totally different than what's been in the United States. And when these, like for instance, a child falls on the ground, on the playground and gets hurt, the other children run up to that child. They do a complete medical evaluation and help that child understand you're going to be okay. Yeah, because they know all this information.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And they're flourishing, even the autistic ones with Asperger's.
Wow. Change is happening on the planet, even amongst all of that. All right, we're going to do the meditation, but we're going to take a quick bathroom break. All right, we're about to do the meditation. We're going to do a little bit, maybe a little bit different of a meditation. I may wind up guiding you through a special experience. If you haven't done so already, bring your awareness and attention to the rhythmic breathing, nice and deep into the belly. Find a rhythm that's comfortable for you. And as you begin breathing deeply, rhythmically, allow your awareness and attention to begin to move inward into the feelings, into the heart center. Letting go of the mind, moving into vulnerability, surrender, trust. And as we've called before, setting our intention, we acknowledge the presence of the great heart center of Mother, her consciousness as golden liquid light, emanating up from the core, filling the room, imbibing itself into the prana of the air. And each breath we take magnifies that unconditional love, golden loving essence, filling the room, merging with our senses, bathing our being into the love of the Mother. In all directions, then, the body becoming more sensitive, feeling every nuance, opening every pore, assisting in the inhale of drawing in that precious, pranic, golden liquid light. The lungs acting like extensions of the muscle of the heart, drawing in that pure essence. Integrating consciousness, sensation, feeling, integration and boundary. Each inhale then dissolving the weight and boundary of the body itself. Drawing in more consciousness and integration with the mother's consciousness, heart center. Expanding, magnifying. The ability to feel all things around you as we bring our awareness to the core of the earth. And joining all together with her consciousness. Enjoying complete acceptance, full vulnerability, and the compassion extending into the boundary of each person in our circle and group. Radiance then of going inward, opening the boundaries via trust, vulnerability, allows for a communion and reverence with such compassion. We take comfort, solace in this equanimity, vulnerability. Share via the consciousness of each and the mother. The energy, liquid, spherical, equal in all direction. Feel the you, the familiarity, the reverence, the communion, the equality. In each other. And from this circle and this understanding, we open those fields, spherical fields, toroidal in nature, to encompass the whole earth all is done. What's left is the acceptance, appreciation, recognition, connection, reformation. present.